All right, good evening, everybody. Can folks at home hear me? All right, perfect. We are going to call the regular October meeting of the Reading Board of Education to order at 7:37 p.m. And we are holding this meeting. That's YouTube. Okay. We are holding this meeting in a hybrid fashion. The members of the board and the central office administration are joining you from Reading Community Center, and the public and members of the administration are also joining us remotely. So we're going to do our best to work through this and figure out whether this hybrid setup works well or doesn't work at all. And so the first item of business is going to be approval of minutes from the September 1st, 2020 regular board meeting. And I will look for a motion to approve those minutes. Take yourself off mute.
So moved.
Heather, is there a second? Mike Hoffman, thank you. Are there any comments with respect to the minutes from September 1st? Colleen.
Right on with myself. I was so close, but I missed the spelling of Vanessa Visner's name. It's the Vanessa part I got corrected, but the Visners, there should be another S. Yeah. Thank you.
So we did the second page, in the top line, and there's a text at the end of it. Any other comments or questions? All in favor of approving the minutes as amended? Aye.
Aye.
Chris, I think you're talking, but I can't hear you. I don't know if others at home can hear also or not hear.
I'll make a comment. It's nice to see everyone again.
Can I be heard? There we go. All right, building administrative reports. And in case it wasn't clear, there was no public comment, and board member comment was Heather saying it's nice to see everybody again. Building administrative reports, we'll start with Mrs. Hammond and RES, please.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Just an update. I know we had an opportunity to share our October board report with you. It has been quite the month, to say the least, but I give my staff, our staff, Joe and I both, just so much credit. They have worked so hard and welcoming these children back and really working all hours of the days and weeks to really get things working and making sure that we're connecting with our at-home learners. We knew that this week would present some challenges bringing everyone back in. But again, we've had all hands on deck and we have been able to welcome back most of our children. I know, Chris, you had inquired as to those numbers, and if you would like, I can share those now based on our current enrollment and who's attending full-time. Yes, okay.
Yes, please.
So we continue to have 44 children who are engaging in temporary learning from home. We have 21 children who are engaged in the hybrid approach to learning. 10 of them on Monday and Tuesday, 11 of them on Thursday and Friday. We have had a handful of individuals based on their individual family needs, opt to homeschool during this time of transition right now. Just saying, we love you guys. We're so thankful for everything you've done, but this is just what's going to be best for our family at this time. And in welcoming these families back this past Monday, yesterday, feels like more than 2 days, the exact things that were keeping Joe and I up at night as we were trying to think of the procedures that we were going to have to change and adjust were the exact things that we were presented with. And through our debrief sessions yesterday, both after morning drop off and after afternoon pickup, we made some slight adjustments to our timing and our processes. And we felt overall, not only with parent drop off and pickup, but also the buses, that we were able to shave a bunch of time off today. So, we'll continue that, but a huge thank you to our parents. I can't tell you, I know Joe too we've really just been receiving some really kind words of support, a lot of patience from everyone as we're navigating through this new world of school right now and of learning. So thank you to everyone, and mostly to our children. They have been true rock stars. We weren't really sure how friends were going to return, and they have we were all summer concerned about how are these little friends going to keep their masks on. They are rock stars all day, really, engaging with each other and leaving them on. There being very minimal issues with them. So again, a huge thank you to everyone. I think the concerns and the struggles as they've come, Joe and I think have really come together with the help of our staff to problem solve and to work through some of the issues that I think we were expecting. But again, on the path to really being excited that everybody is back, and hoping to keep on this trend for a while. I can't hear anything, Chris, if you are sharing.
I'd like to try one. How does this work? Can you hear me, Natalie?
Yes.
The enrollment numbers. So you have a total of 478 from the report, and then 44 learning from home, 21 hybrid, and then homeschool is not a part of the 478, right?
That's correct. Those are families that have withdrawn at this time. They're looking to re-enroll once we are out of the COVID situation that we're in. But yes, so they are withdrawn from those numbers.
Do you have an approximate number on that?
Just the most recent with this transition 4. I could get you the updated numbers from June. We have had since March 12th, we have had families opt for different reasons from March till now, but I can absolutely get you those numbers. But I know that since this transition and this decision was made, we've had 4 say, you know what, we were doing temporary learning from home, or we were doing hybrid, but this is going to work best for us right now. But I will, when we chat next time, I will have numbers for you from March until now.
Thanks, Natalie.
Yeah. If, let's say, hypothetically, all 65 who are either learning from home or are in the hybrid all decided to come in and be in person full time, would that put any particular strain or difficulty on the building as a whole?
So in sharing back honestly with you, I know Dr. Harrison had an opportunity to come into our building today. We have some classes that are at full capacity right now, who all children have returned. And we have others that we have 5 or 6 who are still in either hybrid or temporary learning from home. So I think with those friends who are temporary learning from home, mostly because they're not coming in at all during the week right now, I think once we balance those out, the classes are full right now. If you look at a class of 20 desks spread out 3 to 6 feet apart, while ensuring that the teacher is at the front of the classroom, again, everyone is faring okay, but the classrooms are packed. And I think thank goodness we spent time over the summer removing a lot of that larger furniture because I know that would not have fit in there. So I think we were proactive in preparing the classrooms and ensuring that there was going to be enough space, but the space that we do have left is being absolutely used to capacity.
Right. Okay. And I'm not trying to suggest that there's any sort of imminent difficulty. It was just a question. I would think that, you know, the reality is that if there is an increase, it'll be very incremental over time, as opposed to 60 people all of a sudden raising their hands and saying, you know, let me in, let me in.
That's absolutely right. You are absolutely right about that, Chris, because there are so many people who have varying opinions of what's best for their family and their children at this point. And we are, Joe and I know, as well as the teachers, have been engaging in conversations with those families as their viewpoints and their feelings about the situation change. So we are working with those families. But yeah, I agree with you. It will be incremental rather than an overnight change. And right now we do have the desks ready for when children are ready to come back full time. And the children who are hybrid, they already have their own desk space set up in their classrooms for whether they come in on Monday and Tuesday or on Thursday and Friday. So that space is already set up for those children.
Sure.
So was it okay? Was it a commitment? Was there a commitment to the end of November? Did I see paperwork that said there's a commitment? So if you chose to do learn from home or hybrid, you are going to stick with that decision for a period of time, correct?
So that letter, I do recognize that Dr. Harrison wrote that, and in conversation with local principals and in sharing my thoughts with Dr. Pearson-Ugal, we have opted to really work with families on an individual level. Yes, we would like people to remain committed, but we also know that situations are changing for many of us daily. So as a matter of fact, I just had a conversation with a family today, and we've created a plan that's going to work for them. It's going to be best for those children. And really, at the end of the day, our job is to provide an appropriate public education for the children. So we're willing to be flexible, but I also recognize Dr. Harrison's encouragement, because we really do want to have people stay committed, because consistency and that structure is really what's most important and best for the children to get them into a routine. But we are willing to be flexible with families as well as needs change in each family.
All right, try that again. There we go. There were no other questions for Natalie, so Phyllis for John Reed, please.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you. Our reopening plan was wonderful. We put a lot of work into it, but you know, we were all sort of operating in the dark, if you will, not really knowing what it was going to be like. Frankly, in retrospect, it was, I think, helpful to start in hybrid. It gave us a chance to sort of try everything out. And this week, I must tell you, it has felt wonderful to have all the children in the building. It feels normal. Some things we anticipated didn't happen, and other things we didn't anticipate we're adjusting. So I will first share with you our numbers. So our total enrollment is 328 students. In the hybrid mode, our parents who have chosen to keep their children coming into us 2 days a week, we have a total of 21 students. Natalie, I think coincidentally you had the same. That's about 6% of our enrollment. Our cohort C, those students now number 33. That number has gone down. And the majority of our students, 84% of our students, are coming into us every day now. That's our cohort D. That's 224 students. it felt different in the building. To be quite frank, my worry was, are these little kiddos going to be able to keep those masks on? But as Natalie shared, that seems to be a non-issue. Very, very few incidents have come to our attention, and mostly, a student might forget, or there may be some sensitivity issues, and we've been dealing with those. I will be very frank. One of the things we are focusing on now is social distancing, because some of these children haven't seen each other in 6 months. So it's actually not a problem when we're passing in the hallways. That's just a brief encounter, but we really have to constantly remind them. We walk around with our arms straight out. It looks kind of bizarre, but it's our visual reminder to our students that you need to keep a little distance, particularly at the end of the day when all they want to do is look at each other's phones and just do the natural things that children do. So we are going to do some other things. For example, our new head custodian, Stephen, he's ordered some chalk, and we're just literally going to make boxes for our parent pickup area, just to make sure our students have a visual, a reminder, which is what they need. Because, it's a one-off thing to put on a mask and leave it on, but it's a constant going against one's nature to keep 6 feet away from your dear friends whom we haven't seen in 6 months. We're working on it, but frankly, we are very, very pleased so far. It really felt good to be in the building these past few days. It felt, again, normal. And we're just hoping that we can stay in. Things are going pretty well. So thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis, for the question. Chris, why don't we just go around? We'll start with Chris.
Oh, just real quick, I'd like to ask you the same question, Phyllis, that I asked Natalie about whether there would be a significant difference or strain if you had 100% full-time in person.
It's a good question. It's a little harder to answer. I think the strain, if you would be distributed throughout the day, because it depends upon our student schedules. So I do feel pretty confident, though, that even if all students were back in, we have a pretty good backup plan. I thank Darlene for that, for putting it in place. So any of our classes that are oversized, if you will, that are over 20, 21 students, where we can't keep the 3 feet, well, we've just relocated them to either the community room or the back of the learning center. And we would continue to do that. And as it just has worked out so far, we've been able to do it. And we did have most of our teachers remove any extraneous furniture and things like that in the classroom. So we do have enough space. And again, when we don't, we can move them to these other locations. So far, so good.
Okay, thank you. And again, my purpose for asking the question is to establish that we have the capacity to handle a change,
Yes.
knowing that whatever change happens would be incremental.
Yes.
Phyllis, can you please repeat the numbers
Yes.
that you shared with us about the number of students?
Yes.
I think you were saying in hybrid and temp learn from home.
Yes. So our cohorts A and B, those will be our hybrid numbers. So cohort A, and those are the students who come in to us on Monday and Tuesday. We have 12 students. Cohort B, we have 9, and those students attend on Thursday and Friday. Cohort C are our students who are temporarily learning from home. We have 33 students. This is as of today in that cohort. That's about 10%. And cohort D are students attending every day. That number is 224.
Phyllis, I think it's supposed to be 274.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Nope. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. 274. Leave it to the math teacher. Correct. Yeah. It's 274. I'm sorry. My handwriting is terrible. And the total number is 328. Thank you, Darlene.
Any other questions for Phyllis? Heather?
Do we know how many, I'm looking for a number for kids who have withdrawn either for homeschooling or have gone to a different school district. I'm just trying to compare the projected enrollment with the actual enrollment and see if there are kids who would have been here if it were not for all of this stuff.
Yeah, I don't have those numbers, but we can get them for you.
I would still like to know how many families have either chosen to homeschool their kids or put them in a different school system.
Totally agree. I think it's valuable for that reason as well as to reconcile.
Yeah, and also to know why, if we have any way of collecting that information.
So Chris,
Yeah, we can get that for you from Mrs. Clements. We'll get it, I'll get on that tomorrow and we'll get that information to you.
So following this chart, so an 800 and Prada would follow that 98, kind of going diagonally up on the chart. Okay, got it.
The logo looks good.
We love our logo. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I think our two principals did a wonderful job giving us an overview of what the return to in-person learning looks like in the building. I just want to give just kind of some background information leading up to our transition on October 5th. So as we know, in early August, the plan that the board approved and discussed on August 11th was to bring all of our students back to in-person learning on October 5th. And one of the things that we wanted to do during the start of the year was obviously to learn some really good lessons about just having half of the students in the building at a time with the hybrid model, but also that gave us an opportunity to follow the health data really closely across our area and across the state. And I wanted to just share some information with the community based on some of that health data that we're seeing across the state that made us feel very comfortable with moving forward with the original decision to bring all students back in the building, K-8 in our schools at the start of this week. So these numbers are based on data from last Friday, so it hasn't been updated over the weekend. But from the start of the school year to last Friday, across the state, there have been 396 cases, COVID-19 cases within all of our schools across the state. 294 of those were students and 102 staff. And what we're seeing is that we talked about this with the commissioner in a meeting on Friday with superintendents, that even though we see that there has been some positive cases with students across the state, that they have not been able to tie those that spread to community spread within a school. So we're not looking at our schools as kind of hotspots where transmission is happening from student to student, or even from adult to student, or vice versa. And that was really positive data. I think that was really helpful for us to get a picture of what to expect in our schools, but also I think for us who are on the front lines of implementing all of the health and safety strategies, it's a good signal to us that the strategies that we've put in place are working as intended to mitigate and limit the amount of spread. We, of course, are looking at the statewide data, but more importantly, we're looking at Fairfield County data, and then more locally looking at our data in Reading, and then also in Easton. And so I wanted to give just kind of an update on that. We look at this weekly, and there are two indicators that are really important that we're looking at. The first is a 7-day average per 100,000 population. And so in Reading, what we've seen is that number right now is 4.2. But when we look at the percent of test positivity, we are still at 0. And so that really centers us very much in, it keeps us in that low community spread area where that really favors in-person learning. Where we would be concerned is if that percentage got up above 10%, and really kind of looking at between 10 and 25%. That will give us some signals like of maybe we need to make some different decisions about the current learning model. And so that information I think is helpful to hear. You know, for me as a parent, I'm also watching these numbers for my own child's district, because I think that that's really important just to get a sense of what's happening. And the state has launched a new dashboard on the state site that I'll send some information about, where you could follow the health data across our state and look at the different models that schools around our state are implementing. And so what that does is then it gives us a picture of what that infection rate spread is with students. And when we look at that data, it is 0.0008. So it's a very, very small number. Again, that points to the importance of not relaxing, of course, and being reckless with all of the safety mitigation strategies that we have in place, but doubling down on them, recognizing that they are working. And so I appreciate our administrators for just sharing information about their continued attention to maintaining social distancing, which is of course the obvious challenge when you double the number of students who are currently in the building. I had an opportunity to spend some time today at RES visiting our first, second, and third grade classrooms. That was today. Today is Tuesday. I really had to think about what I had on when I was, because it seems like days ago, but that was today. And I'm happy to report our students were engaged. Our teachers were doing a fantastic job connecting with students, obviously in person, which is, kind of what they're used to, but also being really intentional about continuing with the connections with our students who are learning at home. And so, we talk a lot about how different this world is that we are sort of living in from an educational standpoint. And it is true. And I think that today being in the classrooms just was a nice testament to the attention that our teachers continue to put on students. And I recognize that that this is challenging for everyone, and there's a sense of the unknown, but it was business as usual in the classrooms. And I think that that's just a testament to our professionals' approach to keeping students at the center of everything that we do. Of course, we'll continue to monitor the health data to continue to be convinced that this is the right model. And then, of course, if there is a need to pivot to hybrid, or our health data indicates that there's a need to shift to fully remote or fully distance learning, of course, we will share that information and communicate. But just as far as the transition to in-person learning, I think that some of the feedback that I got from our families, they were very appreciative that they had the option to continue in the hybrid learning model, and if that works for their family. And I know that this adds another layer on for teachers of being able to, who's coming on which day. And that really was the purpose for establishing a longer term commitment so that we could have our families stay in this model for anticipating from now until Thanksgiving. That said, I really appreciate Ms. Hammond's approach that if there is the ability to have some flexibility, I want our principals to be able to do that, because everything that we do is really designed around how we keep students at the center and are making really smart, focused decisions for them academically. And I think that we recognize each situation is different, and so we want to approach it from that standpoint.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that you had, the families had the option for all three options. Because I have heard from other districts where that wasn't the case. And so I recognize the challenges that it presents, but I also appreciate for families that they had three different options to go.
And just as a piggyback on that, one of the things that decisions that we made early on, which I think was a really smart decision, again, keeping students at the center, was that we allowed the option of present online. So if there was a student who needed to be home, out for the day sick, but not necessarily so sick that they can't work or can't continue to learn, we gave the option of being present online. I think that what that does is it prevents families from sending students into the building who may be symptomatic because they don't want them to miss too much learning, and allows for that flexibility. And so one of the rationale and discussions that we had when we were considering, do we allow this, what I'm calling voluntary hybrid model to continue? What we recognize is that because we have already given the option for present online, we didn't want families to start then creating their own hybrid, right? Well, I'm just going to keep my child home Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and they're going to be present but online. And then that would create an additional challenge for our teachers where they couldn't plan ahead. And so I think that, finding the balance between those two was to gift our teachers with some level of knowing what to expect and some certainty around who's coming on what days.
I'm going to speak loudly, so hopefully I can be heard through Dr. Harris's microphone. And going to turn it over to Dr. Pearson-Newgall for an update on the plan for professional development. And would you like me to let you share screen, or do you want me to walk through the slides?
I'd be happy to have you walk through the slides if you're willing to do that. All right, good evening, everyone. I am going to bring us back to the presentation that Dr. Harrison gave just 1 week ago to the joint boards that reminded everyone of the many components of reopening. And part of that, of course, is engaging students using technology. So for the month of October, the focus of this presentation will include some information about how our teachers will be spending time on Wednesday afternoons and for part of this Friday. The essential questions that we posed include, how can we ensure teachers are equipped with the pictures in the way, necessary skills, resources, and support to engage students in a virtual learning environment? And how can we engage teachers in professional learning opportunities that align with our enduring goals and aspirations? And so I will not read through them, but just to remind everyone of academic excellence, building a caring community, and cultivating future-ready learners, the ABCs that we created to start last year. When I think about integration of technology in our technology academies, all A, B, and C are so important, but ultimately planning for true innovative use of technology is focused more on the C. How do we create the conditions to cultivate future-ready learners? So for this month, the focus will be on technical improvements in skill building that will enable innovative technology integration. We have 4 Wednesday afternoons that will be devoted to this work. And just to remind everyone that while we think of our early dismissal days as half days, they are really not half days. They provide about an hour and 45 minutes in the afternoon for our teachers to engage in this work. And so the afternoons include the 7th, the 14th, the 21st, and the 28th. And we are so grateful for that additional time to engage in this work. In addition to that, there's a full staff day this Friday for Easton and Reading. Half of that day will be spent on creating student learning objectives and professional action plans to meet those objectives. And half of the day will be for the Technology Academy. Last week, we thought about technology integration in 3 different areas: technical improvements, skill building, and authentic learning. I'm going to walk through each one of those in terms of the immediate focus as well as the long-term focus. Okay, yep. So to begin with technical improvements, the topics will include consistent naming conventions, and these naming conventions will be the same across all 5 buildings, while, as we can imagine, at the elementary school level, the primary classroom is really the homeroom classroom. So it might be kindergarten Smith as an example of broad, the grade level, to narrow the name of the teacher. As we move up in grades to the middle school and then ultimately to the high school, as you can imagine, there are many more layers of the naming convention, but we will stay consistent in terms of moving from broad to narrow. We'll also look at the common placement of due dates in stream links. So for families that are managing many children's schedules, and for students, particularly at the secondary level, that might have up to 10 classrooms to manage, the location of due dates and stream links will be consistent. So building leadership tech teams will meet together this week, and they will draft common definitions in use within Google Classroom. And that will include the definition of assignments, questions, announcements, quizzes, and materials. And for Google Classroom users, you know that those terms are associated with Google Classroom, and one might believe that they're commonly understood and defined the same way for all. But as we've seen in the first month of school, that's actually not the case. So we want teachers to come together, share their good thinking about what those terms should mean, and then get greater consistency across the buildings and across the districts. So that will be the first step. The next has to do with skill building. The skill building area, I really distinguish skill building from true professional learning in that one can acquire a certain skill set and practice that skill set in order to become competent. Whereas when we think about adult learning and professional learning, that's much more of a long-term commitment that is evolving and always changing. So in the skill building category, we want teachers to build their skills with stream tools in both Google Meet and Zoom, to become more familiar with security settings, muting, screen sharing, and breakout rooms, and then to focus on the use of conferencing software tools for small group instruction. The next is Google Classroom organization, calendar, course, unit, assignments, and how that's organized. And again, this requires the teachers to come together, to have collaborative discussions, and then to really think about how their online Google Classroom presence is really a mirror for their curriculum pacing and how that can be organized and understood by students. The next is communication, the use of notifications, reminders, email, and preferred methods and management for student to teacher messages. I think we hear from both teachers and sometimes from parents that the communication is not always as efficient as we might like it to be. Teachers will remark, I got a private message from a student very late. I didn't even realize it was there until the next day. And then in some cases, students saying, I wasn't sure I was supposed to check my email, but I was messaged an email. I thought it was going to be in the classroom. And so we want teachers to have conversations about how to communicate consistent communication, messaging expectations so that everyone's clear on what's to be expected. Using the hardware to engage students, and that's really allowing teachers the time to use whether it's a camera or dual screens, so that they have more time to practice how to engage students who are learning both at home and in the classroom. And then the last in this topic has to do with the management of digital citizenship. We know that with our use of technology as it is right now, the need for us all to be good digital citizens is especially important. So while the skill set here is the management of digital citizenship, I would say the real learning piece goes in the next column. And that includes how we can really integrate digital citizenship into all curricula so that it's not a standalone course, it's not a special class that students will go to, but learning how to be a good citizen, whether you are online or in person, is a part of what we do in every content area. And then finally, the authentic learning side. And this has to do with more true technology integration. And for some of our teachers, they will begin their work in this area right away because they already have that skill set developed. They're already well-versed in the tools. And for others, this will evolve over the month and then the months certainly that follow this year. And that would be the use of breakout rooms for small group meetings, really focusing on refining our methods of differentiation. Continuing to increase our understanding of the use of various software tools, including Pear Deck, Edpuzzle, Seesaw, Kami, and Flipgrid. These are the ideas that were offered by our teachers. Focusing on social and emotional learning in a remote setting, which can be challenging. And really thinking about assessment. And this is, of course, such a broad topic. How do we assess using sometimes qualitative and quantitative methods, as well as performance-based measures, engaging students in a way so that we're gathering information about their performance, but in a more personalized manner. It's not as simple as distributing a quiz in a form, having the students fill in the answers, and then giving them a score on the quiz. And so that really leads to a greater conversation about feedback. What type of feedback really supports student growth? And then grading. And thinking about the bigger picture of if I have a course and there might be 1,000 possible points in the course, how am I going to break that down so that at the beginning of the course, my students have a good sense of the value of each assignment and how all of that will add up to the whole. And then finally, digital citizenship, which I already spoke about. So this work will continue throughout the entire year, but the focus for October will be on the initial technical fixes or improvements that will provide greater consistency, and then some of that skill building. Also recognizing that teachers are in very different places in terms of their strengths and their needs, and much of this will also include an opportunity for teachers to do some self-reflection and think about the best way for them to spend their time in order to come up to that common expectation. Questions?
Thank you, Stephanie. Questions?
Hang on. Say it again.
Questions?
That you talked about the social emotional. Our Are kids able to meet with like, I did.
Sorry.
Are kids able to meet with like, counselors, things like that, one-on-one, even if they're at home?
They are absolutely. So, and this is one of the lessons learned from last spring. We really wanted to be sure that we engage students regardless of the way that the students were participating. So our counselors work to create ways of connecting with those kids in a way that would meet individual needs. It's not necessarily easy, and some of the students who are learning at home 5 days a week are not entirely comfortable, right? And so we want to make sure that those students also feel like there's a trusted adult and they still feel connected to our school communities, even though they're not actually coming in the door. And that's so important. And I know our counselors have been working on that.
And I'm sorry, on naming conventions, that's more just terminology across different teachers, different grade levels.
Yeah, it is. From what I understand, for students who are managing, say, 10 classrooms, right, used to every subject area, the way that the Google Classroom shows up on the student page is, of course, different than the way it looks on the teacher page. And it can be confusing because of the layers. So it's not always clear what the classroom is if the order doesn't follow a logical sequence. So it's not, the feedback that I'm getting is that it's not sort of a make it or break it, but it's something that we could improve to just help the organization for students at home. So there's some kids who would say, well, I have no problem, I can figure this out, right? So I can find my teacher's name embedded in the list. But for other kids, this is one more thing to manage, and it can make something more confusing than it needs to be.
Right, and we've always tried to have more of an interaction between parent, student, teacher. Is some of the focus on the training trying to help so that me as a parent, I can be able to better see what assignments they've done, what assignments they haven't done, what I can work and maybe even be able to better work with them on the weekends, on the evenings, type of thing?
So I just want to be sure I'm understanding your question. So a part of it has to do with the way that the due dates are selected on assignments and how that feeds into the to-do list. And from what I understand, different ways that due dates are being created, whether people are checking the due date box and then generating a due date, which then moves on to a to-do list, or sometimes embedding the due date within the narrative of the assignment, which then doesn't make the to-do list or get on the calendar. And so in that way, it can be tricky for kids and for parents who are trying to help kids. But something else, and I'm not sure if this is what you were referring to, is our continued interest to want to connect with parents to find out how we can keep supporting parents at home. So the initial weeks of school, we had the parent tech tip nights, and I think a lot of parents found that helpful. Our teachers on the Stay Open Committee have expressed an interest in running parent focus groups from teacher to parent to try and get more feedback about what's working well and what could we improve. So the teachers really want to be the ones who are facilitating those groups and not necessarily always having it be central office or building administrators or board.
Is there something we should be thinking about as we come up on planning for next year as far as software or something, whether we're in a pandemic world or not a year from now or 5 years from now, to be able to have better interaction between student, teacher, parent, administrators, everyone all be able to connect?
So it's my great hope that as a result of this terrible time in our world, we can make advances that will make us never want to go back to some old ways of doing things. And in this category, I imagine the really innovative practices that have engaged kids in different ways because there's an urgency to it, right? We have to do this because we don't have the kids right in front of us. We have to find a way to connect with them that might be more effective than the way that we used to do things. So I think it will play into our budget request because certainly we've been trying to prioritize our purchases to the things that we absolutely must have but there are so many software tools that would really more comprehensively support this work.
And on the other side of that, are there ones that we have that were, really have become less important? Also?
Less useful. There might be. Yeah, I think we're going to see in the next couple of months as we have those conversations. And then another part of that is just sort of the hardware piece. How do you sustain it? One of the things that I hear from teachers is that it's on one screen, it's really tough to manage. So some of our buildings have older devices that have been able to be repurposed so that the device can stay in one spot and just have the classroom view, and then the other device is moving around. And what I'm hoping is that we can learn enough in the next couple of months so that it will inform our budget requests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Oh, can I make a comment? This is just a comment, Stephanie, but I was just thinking along the lines of what you just said. That anyone who thinks that if this virus magically disappeared, we all go back to how we were on March 10th, hasn't been paying attention. And so the skill development, not just the teachers, but the kids, is going to be critically important going forward for years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this isn't just some sort of stopgap, wait till the radiation disappears sort of, emergency situation. This really is an opportunity to develop new skills and new ways of doing things. So I'm sure you're all regarding it in that way, but I think everyone needs to. This isn't just, well, we'll just wait till this goes away and we'll all go back. That ain't happening.
No, I mean, the pandemic has created a health situation that also includes a lot of worry and anxiety. But I imagine we will get to a place where we are on the other side of that part of this, and we can really better self-reflect and assess the gains that have come out of this time, and then figure out how to move forward from there. It really is the urgency that has been created in this situation.
I do think a lot of the work that's being done now, I think a lot of the work that's being done now really does tie into longer-term strategic expectations for how we can move towards individualized education and other sort of long-term growth.
And also, if I could tack something onto that, it can fill some of the gaps that we've had in terms of, I imagine a situation where a student at John Reed might be able to tap into a Barlow class if they're at that level, or even Easton and Reading teaming up once we get to a place where we're more in sync. I think that all those things could be really exciting also.
Other questions or comments on this topic? All right, so if there are no other questions for Stephanie, we'll move on to 6C, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Framework. Dr. Harris.
Thank you very much. I am going to share my screen. All right, so I want to just talk a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion framework. And it's important to think about the work that we do with in frameworks, because frameworks really help to hold things together, right? And so even in the way that we're talking about the technology professional learning, one of the benefits to talking about it over the course of 3 components is that it helps to keep things cohesive. And then we connect to things that we're already doing well, and then we could envision how that could have longer term impact. And so this is the same approach to developing a framework to support our tri-district focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I just want to go backwards just a little bit to talk about the ER9 Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. And so the Eastern Reading and Region 9 Boards of Education charged the task force with advising with respect to the operation and financing of initiatives relating to all of these areas. So looking at professional learning, programming, enrollment, student engagement, community engagement, hiring practices, curriculum, and then of course, policies. And so in thinking about how all of these pieces kind of come together, the charge also included that the committee shall conduct an annual assessment on the state of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and then report to the boards, hold regularly scheduled meetings, establish multi-year goals, identify and recommend appropriate sources of funding for equity, diversity, and inclusion. And really, you know, when I read this and when I was thinking about sort of the work across the tri-districts around this area, that really lends itself to some language and thinking around strategic planning, kind of long-term planning when you're talking multi-year goals. You know, my experience in doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work is that when it's done successfully, it is embedded in everything that we do, so that it's not, you know, well, we do equity work on alternating Mondays, and then on the other days of the week, we are not equitable. That really doesn't make sense. And so you think about how do we hold all of this together? And so I want to introduce a framework that we've been talking about kind of as a team. And so really there's a focus on these 4 different areas. So looking at governance and finance, teaching and learning, faculty and staff, and then partnerships and public impact. This framework is adapted from the work of this researcher, Kumashiro, who his focus is really around doing this DEI work on university campuses from a cohesive standpoint in departments of education. But I feel like it's really useful for us thinking across the district, particularly in our tri-district format, where we still have some work to do around alignment, like we just mentioned. But these 4 areas still really are prominent areas of across all of our districts. And so we could see the impact of how this could connect all of that work. And so then with that framework, there is a 3-phase model to guide the work that's really rudimentary, and it's review the assets and challenges. So basically what's working and what's not. Develop a theory of action, which is essentially, if we do this, then this is what our hopeful outcome is. And then developing and implementing a plan. And so I feel like this framework really aligns nicely with the charge that was given to the DEI task force and connects to sort of the way that we typically approach large-scale improvement initiatives in education. But then I wanted to go back and look at those focus areas and align those focus areas to these 4 categories. So then you see under governance and finance, there's kind of these focus areas around policies and enrollment that really make sense when we start thinking about those 2 pieces together. With teaching and learning, of course, there's the focus on curriculum, but then also connecting in and thinking about student engagement. So you hear us talk a lot about student-centered learning or student-centered approaches, and it really is a sort of education jargon way of saying that we prioritize all of our decisions around what's most important for the student, which seems normal, right? But then we have to keep reminding ourselves, oh wait, let's think about the student as the end user. What are we doing to really connect with them? And so I think that there's a nice kind of connection there with teaching and learning, of course, with the focus around student engagement. With our faculty and staff, there's the focus on professional learning and hiring practices. And you know, Stephanie alluded to this in her presentation around technology, that there's a difference between a training and professional learning, that we really want professional learning to be ongoing and more than just working on a set of skills. But it's bigger than that, and it's really promoting the professional growth of our teachers in the same way that we focus on that work with our students. Then looking at our hiring practices. So in what ways are we thinking about these issues around equity, diversity, and inclusion in the way that we recruit and retain, and then also the way that we are supporting our staff and connecting with staff members even outside of our community. And then of course, programming and community engagement, really connecting to that partnerships and public impact. So this was kind of sort of the first pass at looking at these pieces and how this framework could help hold all of this work together. I want to dig in just a little bit and then connect back to some of what Stephanie just shared with the ABC goals, which I've been talking about these goals for over a month now, and it didn't occur to me until a conversation yesterday that they were ABC. So that's pretty creative. And everyone knows I love a good acronym, so I can't believe that I missed that one. But really looking at the academic excellence and all of that work, connecting to student engagement, connecting to that broader area of teaching and learning. When we think about building a caring community, connecting that to community engagement, thinking about partnerships and public impact. And then of course, what we talked about already around cultivating future-ready learners, connecting that to professional learning, and then thinking about that work with our faculty and staff. So there's nothing magical here, right? But it really is just a way of saying, how do we have all these pieces kind of connecting together in a way that helps us to stay cohesive, that we're connecting the dots on it from a really intentional standpoint, and not just thinking about this sort of as a task force idea or as a central office idea, but really rooting it in the work that's already happening and connecting to that at RES and JRMS. In my visits today, and I meant to jot down whose classroom it was, but I was in a teacher's classroom today, and I was, of course, mesmerized by the students, because many of them, one of the things I asked was, after I introduced myself, I asked if anyone knows what a superintendent does. And I got some really interesting answers from first, second, and third graders. But several of our teachers had some really, had clearly done some intentional work about establishing a very diverse selection of books in their classroom library and had that on display. And it's little things like that, right? Like that's not the end all and be all, but that really is kind of a step in thinking about in what ways are we sending explicit and implicit messages around these issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then how do we support where that's already happening? And so I think that what I have found with using sort of broader frameworks to hold work together is it doesn't feel like just, oh, here's another new thing. And so I think that the challenge for us in education is to make sure that we are not creating environments where people are initiative fatigued, but that we are really sort of narrowing down our focus. Like we're going to do these several things really well because we know that they give us a lot of bang for our buck. And so this is, I see this being an iterative process. This is just kind of a way to start this conversation around DEI and our work with that's happening across all three districts, and then really tying into to support the overall vision of our DEI task force. And I'm really excited about that work. As I've been on my listening tour with our administrators, with community members, with starting to transition with our teachers, and soon we'll be holding some parent forums. I'm hearing some consistent messages around some of these areas, that this is things that people really want to explore and think about, what does this mean for us as a community? And I was even had the opportunity to be interviewed today by one of our high school students for a global history project, American history project that she's doing around these issues, and she's wanted to get my thoughts on what does that mean for education. And so I think that there is a way to really tie these pieces together and support our teachers and our administrators, and then connect to the aspirational goals in our community.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. Are there questions on the presentation? Chris.
You should move on to the next before you let me speak. Just question about, are you at the point where you've established a timeline or interim steps within that timeline?
So I am trying to find this balance of having my foot on the gas pedal and one foot on the brake, right? So it's easy to jump in, particularly with a community that is very passionate about some of these issues, and really just hit the gas pedal and fly ahead. I'm trying to be very conscious that I don't want us to leave people behind. I really want to respect where our teachers are, and understand that that while all of these things are huge commitments, we need to really find that good balance. I think that there's also some high level work that is also, that I think is an important step, kind of going from where we are now to sort of where we want to be on a long-term basis. And simple things like, when we say equity, what are we really talking about? I think that you know, when I listen to the meetings talking about the task force, and had the opportunity to participate in one, I think that there's common thinking around that, but I think that developing a clear equity statement is a part of that work. And so, you know, Heather and I had some great initial conversation as our task force chair. I'd like for us to have some more time to do some kind of longer term planning. One of the slides that I forgot to mention was actually about next steps, not so much a timeline, but just looking at the November 3rd as a big date. We have invited community, staff, and student members to be selected to participate on the task force, and those applications are encouraged to be in by November 3rd. I think that's a significant point. In November, what's happening is that I'll be coming to the end of my entry plan, where the official listening tour is over. I'll still listen, but you know,
But only every other day.
but only right.
Hybrid listening.
So, you know, I think that'll be kind of a nice opportunity to, you know, we'll have that community, that committee formed, and then be able to layer that on with, you know, here are some of the things that I learned as I was during the transition, and let's talk about some kind of longer term pieces related to that.
Thanks.
Other questions? All right, thank you, Dr. Harrison. District administrative reports. Why don't we start with Jen Del Conte and Special Services, if we can.
Sure.
See if we can hear her.
Basically, I'm going to be.
Hold on, Jen.
Hi, I'm going to be really, very brief. What I did for this month, I just want to bring your attention.
Hold on, Jen, hold on. We can't hear you here.
Hi, can you hear me?
I'm back, but I lost the sound to the outside. Dr. Harrison, can you turn your speaker all the way up? Okay, let's try again.
Sure. They're good? Okay, I just really just want to bring your attention to the the difference between the declassified and the exit on the special education report. That's really in section 1, 2, 3. It's in section 4, where it says eligibility and declassification. We broke it down into kids that we've declassified versus kids that we've exited. The difference is when we declassify a student, we say that they are no longer eligible for special education. And that can be done through testing, that can be done through them meeting their IEP goals. Exited mean these are students that have withdrawn from the Reading School District. So given the fact that we are in these unique times, we really wanted to track those students that have been exited, because they could be homeschooled at this time. They could be in another school. So these kids could potentially return to Reading, because we know of a couple of students that have said, we're going to homeschool our child during this time, which means we withdraw them. But next year, if they should return, that's where our impact could be. So if you look at our yes, we have 5 students that have left us, but they could potentially return. And in John Reed, we have 1 student that has left us and again could potentially return. So we are looking to try to keep track of that. But from the state's perspective, they are considered to be exited from special ed. They don't make a distinction between the two, but I thought it was really important as we keep track of where our students are, that we really try to break it down in that way. And if you look on the second page, we've started to keep track of where our numbers are concentrated. So for example, we did see a change in our pre-kindergarten. These are our 4-year-olds that could potentially be going into kindergarten next year. We went from 6 students to 8 students, and I know of at least 1 or 2 more in the pipeline for that pre-K number. So that could have an impact moving forward in the future. But all the other numbers in the other grades are pretty much stable at this time. That's all that I really have for my report.
Thank you, Jen. You have to mute that right now. You have to control the mute on and off. With respect to the percentage with IEPs year over year, it's both reports at 15.9. Is that one of the columns hasn't been calculated, or is it happen to be steady?
I'm not so sure we're going to see too much of a change in that number. I mean, I think we're watching it very closely at this time, but I think that, I'm looking at the RES numbers, they pretty much are flat. We usually see a change around November. So after we do our probes, the benchmark assessments, and then that's when we start looking at it. But right now, we're not seeing a significant change in the number of referrals that we have. What we are seeing a change in the number of new entrants that have moved into Reading. Families that have moved into Reading, have had more IEPs. But we're last year I presented a 4-year trend of my my data chart, and I'm waiting to finalize I'm waiting for that October snapshot to close, and then I'm hoping I can update that so we can really see how many families have moved in, how many families have left. So I think within the next couple of weeks, we should have a better sense of where our numbers really are.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Other questions for Jen on special services? Colleen?
It's not a question. It is a comment that I appreciate all of this data, right? I don't ever recall having access to this level of detail. And I just want to let you know how much I appreciate this way of looking at things.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions, thank you, Jen. And we'll turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, Chris. I have a number of items I'd like to go through, and certainly we'll take questions either at the end or as we go. I thought I'd start off with a discussion first of status in regards to various grants that we've received. A month ago, I talked to you about some of these, and in particular, many of them were were ending up resulting in Chromebook delivery to the district. And that picture's changed a little bit that I wanted to share with you. A month ago in our board meeting, I talked about 224 Chromebooks arising from our operating budget. So that was part of our annual budgeting process. But that we had also obtained through the federal CARES grant, 118 Chromebooks in addition to that. And I also spoke of something called the Everybody Learns Initiative, which is a state grant that issues Chromebooks to us directly. And we were receiving 32 with that. That was a total of 374 devices that are on order. Since then, we've learned there's a second wave of this Everybody Learns initiative that's going to result in an additional 141 Chromebooks, bringing our total to 515 for the district, which is a material step forward. In addition to those grants, there's also something I'd spoken also about at the time called the Coronavirus Relief Fund. It's valued for the Reading District at a little over $81,000. That process has taken hold now, and the application for that was submitted last week. That's a reimbursement type of grant, meaning we apply in various categories of expenditure for things that we know that we are spending on that are unique due to COVID. The next step of that, once that's finalized, would be to actually submit the requests for the reimbursement and get that money back. So we have the opportunity to get up to $81,000 back from that, which will certainly help us in regards to the additional spending we've been doing. I will just note that that grant comes in several subcategories. So every dollar is not available for every type of expenditure, but we do anticipate the ability to reallocate things where perhaps the grant is a little higher than what we need in one place and a little lower than what we need in another place. So I would certainly anticipate the ability to expend all of that, but we'll have to go through that process to obtain that. That's probably a good transition to talk a little bit about I was going to go to 2021 and talk about COVID spending, but perhaps I'll do a little detour on 2019, 2020 first. And that is to say that 1920 is closed at this point. I had given an estimate of where the unexpended budget would land at our last meeting, but I can confirm it now. It's just a little north of $467,000, which was slightly towards the high end of the expectation. I can now turn to this year, the 2021, and you do have this budget object summary in your materials for 2021. The first thing I think I would call your attention to is it's not as fully encumbered at this point as we would typically have it. We're only about 33% spent in this. And there are a couple of reasons for that, that I think it's important that you have the context. One of those reasons is very intentional in that we are in the process of converting to a replacement financial system called eFinance Plus. So we're deliberately not opening up expenditures for full year. We're opening them through December 31st, because the way that the system will work is the system of record will be our current system through December 31st, and then the new system will become the system of record as of January 1st at that point. So we'll have to be doing a little bit of hybrid reporting to be able to pull that together. But the reality is the new system will contain all of certainly summary level data for this fiscal year. Details will continue to be in the existing system. A second reason is the majority of our expenditures, of course, come from the payroll side, and you see that payroll is largely not yet encumbered. And similarly, there are some other categories such as transportation that are not yet encumbered. Frankly, this is strictly a case of workload, given the staff that we have and the very heavy workload in regards to the school reopening and all of the work associated with that, in addition to the financial system work. It's something that is in progress. It is active at this moment, but it's not complete as of the time of this report. The last thing I think I would call your attention to in regards to this is in the 615 object, which is the very bottom of page 2, it's maintenance supplies, and you will see that it is already overspent. The reason that it is already overspent is I'm actually accumulating all COVID expenditures in this object. And I'm doing that intentionally to isolate them so that we have line of sight visibility to them. As this grant money comes in, we'll distribute them financially back to their proper place. So there are things in that object right now that are not maintenance supplies, but that, as I say, is by design. And through the course of the continuing management of COVID spending, they'll be unwound and moved to the appropriate location as to where they need to be. So that's not a cause for concern. It's actually an intentional activity right now. So to speak then briefly about the status of the 2021 year fiscally, I think I would characterize it at the moment as not worrisome from purely a dollar's sense. I'm not terribly concerned. But that said, it needs to be monitored and just watched throughout its lifetime because we don't know what tomorrow brings and we don't know what next month brings. But at this point, we had originally put together an estimate in mid-July, which seems like a long time ago. And that aggregate spending was on the order of about 290K anticipated bubble spending for COVID. That was made up of about 50K or so of staff related and the balance of it non-staff related, materials related. From the staffing side, that was estimated at the time on a 90-day basis as a midpoint. I would say at this point, even on a 90-day basis, I'm looking at probably only about 20K versus the 50K. And I think that reflects evolving thinking from the time that these numbers needed to be put together to what really happens on the ground and what do we really actually need to do. Similarly, on the non-staffing side, that was about 235K estimated. And while I would anticipate we still have more to go there, we've really only spent about 80K to date in that category. And I think this also reflects continued learning and thought. When Dr. Pearson-Ugal was talking earlier this evening, you mentioned sort of that keen eye looking hard at what was the right thing to do as we work our way through these processes. I think that's why these numbers reflect this, is that we're watching carefully and thinking carefully, and our thinking has evolved over time. So the good news is evolved on the low side. Between the grant money that I mentioned before, the 81K, we do have some underspending in some other areas of the budget, such as things like transportation for the extended school year program not occurring, those types of things. I'm comfortable that this is not currently going to exceed our overall allocation for the year. But I've always said, and I would certainly recommend, that the January time is the time to really start to look hard at that and where that trend line is going at that time, to leave sufficient time to take action should action need to be taken after that, and then to also have at that point a good 4 or 5 months worth of actuals under your belt to be able to really analyze it. So that's everything I wanted to cover in regards to that. The transfers report is here, and I'm happy to take questions on that, as well as the employee benefits account report has been included. We have August claims here. September claims are not yet available. August was a higher month than we would typically see. I would guess that this is still some of that residual working its way through as medical facilities become open and people can return to procedures that they may have needed to have delayed. This also reports the board's additional contribution from the 1920 funds of $310,683, which was part of the board's desire to get to the equivalent of a 500K balance as of June 30th. So that number to get there was the $310,000. Those are the things I wanted to cover.
Thank you, Scott. So John, was you go back?
Scott, I have a question. So you mentioned at the beginning, in closing out the 1920 fiscal year, there was 467,000 unexpended. I think that's 467,000 after our contribution of 310,000, right? So unexpended might have been somewhere around 777,000. Then we contributed 310 to the health insurance program and returned 467 to the town.
Yes,
Okay.
that's
I just
accurate.
wanted to confirm that it was net of or,
Yes, that's exactly right.
okay. Thank you.
John?
Scott, I just want to thank you. Whether it's staying on top of the grants, just doing what you do, you manage these buildings and these dollars like they're your own. So I know that you're leaving. We're going to miss you. You've done a great job here. And thank you very much.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Thank you. I appreciate that. It was on my mind to note that I will be here through the end of the October month, but this is my final Reading Board of Education meeting. So I would like to thank you as well. It's been my honor to be a part of this and to be able to support you. I think I would also like to recognize the central office team. They are definitely punching above their weight class. It's a small team, but their dedication is exemplary. It's a small staff who achieves some pretty great things. They do the right thing the right way every day, and it's great to work with them. Thank you.
I just want to point out that I think it was Dr. McMorrin that accepted your resignation. I did not. So we can talk after the meeting.
Question about the Chromebooks and the grants and sort of the, additional funding that's given us 515 now. How close does that get us to being in a one-to-one position for the whole district?
I think, and it may be best if Natalie participates in this, but I think that where I understood it previously was John Reed, based on the ordering that had been done, was anticipated to be at that point, and it was RES who was going to be short. So with the incremental 141 that we got, I'm not sure how much closer that brings RES ultimately. Perhaps Natalie could comment on that.
Yeah, I can say that we will still be short. We will not yet be at one-to-one. We had a discussion today with the tech leadership team talking about the larger goals associated with achieving that hardware goal at least. And Natalie could provide, Natalie or Joe, I see Joe here on my screen, could provide the actual figures for RES, but we are short of being one-to-one.
Joe, give the update.
Yeah, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me right now, but currently in the building, we have 191, not in the building, but for RES students, we have 191 devices. Approximately 70 of those we have loaned out to families for use at home, whether they were in the hybrid model or in the temporary learning from home model. With the grant funding and the Chromebooks that were budgeted for within this year, once those arrive, we'll be closer to one-to-one, but not exactly there. I think the number will be around 400. And as Natalie shared earlier, we have closer to almost 500 students.
But we can get to a one-to-one grades 1 through 8 at the very minimum if you wanted to. And it also creates an opportunity from the budget perspective of saying, if it's a goal to get to one-to-one, we've closed the gap tremendously through these grants. And it's no longer a go purchase 800 Chromebook task to get there.
I'd like to add something, if I may. When John Reed gets its order, this is not the grant, this is our regular order. Sometime in October, we're hoping we will have a surplus then of approximately 75 Chromebooks that we will be able to give to RES. So I'm hoping that gets you closer to 120. They're working because currently they're being used by our 5th and 6th graders in the classrooms.
So for clarity then, the 75 that John Reed anticipates having an excess in about a month.
Yes.
When they move over to RES, is that including, Joe, in your 400, or does it become 475 at that point?
No, my numbers did not include the 75 that Phyllis just mentioned. So yeah, it'll bring us closer to 1-to-1.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Scott, who still has to endure at least one more tri-board with us in a few weeks? All right. Thank you, Scott. Any other district administrative reports? Anything, Dr. Harris? If there are no more Board of Education committee reports. Hearing none. Public comments. If you can raise your hand in the participants window or otherwise make yourself known. Hopefully I can be heard this time. Going once, going twice. All right, no public comment. Board member comment. See no board member comment. Is there?
I'll just say that this has gone a lot better than I thought. Just for the record.
You can't fall off the floor, Chris.
I want to thank our chair because the amount of work and thought and effort that I know he's putting into trying to get us back together in a room. He's a volunteer, we're all volunteers, but he's a volunteer really spending so much time trying to make things happen for us. And I really appreciate all the extra effort. I love seeing your faces all in this room. And, you know, even with the little feedback here and there and like the technology challenges, I still think, I think we're the first board, right, to meet together in person. And I have you to thank for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. As Chris would say, we are pioneers.
That was not your turn.
No, it was not.
Yeah, right?
Any other board member comment tonight? Hearing none, I'll look for a motion to adjourn our October hybrid meeting. Mike, motion, is there a second? John, any objection? Seeing none, we are adjourned at 9:09 p.m. Thank you.
Holy smokes.
It's a record. All the time to her.
9:06. 9:06.